Some places are forgotten, others are cursed. Welcome to Moonshade Circus, where the greatest show on Earth died decades ago. But the performance never truly ended. My name is Cole, a detective chasing a missing person. But I found myself in an arena where the performers aren't just ghosts. I was given 3 strange rules just to stay alive. What's the creepiest place you've ever visited? Tell me in the comments below. And if you're brave enough to step under the big top after dark, subscribe to Night Creepypasta Rules and ring that bell. Because here the audience is always watching. Some cases etch themselves onto your soul with invisible ink. Whispers that coil around you in the suffocating silence of 3 a.m. Finding Marina Vale already felt like one of those before I'd even logged the first mile. I was hired to drag her back from the Moonshade Circus. A name that tasted like rust and regret on the tongues of Redwater locals. A place infamous for swallowing its entire audience and troupe whole after one final, accursed performance decades ago. Before my boots even crunched on the weed-choked gravel leading to its tattered, faded big top, a hulking, stooped figure, more shadow than man, pressed a grimy, folded note into my hand with 3 crudely scrawled rules for, as it put it, staying off the bill. Don't sit in seat number 9 in the front row. If lions roar from empty cages, throw raw meat inside. If the tarot reader offers you a reading, accept the fate revealed. The air here hung thick and cloying, a nauseating perfume of stale popcorn, damp sawdust, and something else, a faint, sweet, coppery tang, like old, forgotten blood, the profound silence broken only by the mournful rhythmic creak of an empty trapeze swaying in a breeze that never seemed to reach the ground. My predecessor, the last poor bastard of a pie to sniff around Moonshade's secrets. They say he saw Madame Eloise and didn't much care for the cards she dealt. They never found enough of him left to fill a shoebox. The main tent sagged like a dying beast. Its once vibrant stripes faded to mournful pastels. Peeling paint curled from the ornate ticket booth, its window a dark, vacant eye. I pushed open a creaking service flap, the smell intensifying, now with an added note of animal musk and something acrid, like fear itself had a scent. The silence inside was a physical presence. Dust motes danced in the slivers of weak sunlight lancing through tears in the canvas. Rows upon rows of empty, splintered wooden benches curved towards a circular stage, its surface scarred and stained. I took a few steps in, my footsteps echoing unnaturally in the vast, dead space. Instinctively, I found myself near the front row, scanning. Seat number 9. It looked no different from the others, perhaps a little more weathered. I considered sitting for a moment, just to get a lay of the land, but a sudden intense wave of dizzying nausea, a prickling dread that started in my gut and crawled up my spine, made me recoil. The air around that specific seat felt colder, heavy. A connoisseur of decay, are we, Detective Cole? The voice, smooth as aged whiskey, startlingly close, made me jump. A man emerged from the shadows beneath the bleachers, impeccably dressed in a slightly too large, old-fashioned ringmaster's coat. Though the velvet was threadbare, the gold braid tarnished. He was tall, with a mane of silver hair and eyes that held a theatrical, mournful sparkle. Felix Grinwald. He'd introduced himself over a crackling phone line as the custodian of Moonshade's lingering echoes. Mr. Grinwald, I acknowledged, my hand instinctively going to the reassuring weight of my .38 under my jacket. Just getting acquainted with the scene. Ah, yes. The scene of so many grand finales, he said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. He gestured expansively at the decaying splendor. Marina Vale, a spirited girl, drawn to the romance of the grease paint, I imagine. She was here, briefly, like a moth to a dying flame. His answers were silk woven with evasion. And then I pressed. And then detective. Grinwald sighed, a sound like dry leaves skittering across a grave. The curtain fell, as it always does at Moonshade. She simply took her bow and exited stage left, into the grand mystery. He offered no more. From somewhere high in the rigging, a rope creaked, A slow, deliberate sound, like a sigh from the circus itself. Felix Grinwald's gaze flickered upwards for a moment, a shadow passing through those theatrically sad eyes. "Moonshade," he murmured, his voice dropping. "Has always had its particular traditions, detective. One's best respected if one wishes to enjoy the show and still be around for the reviews." My investigation began where Marina's supposed fascination did. The periphery of the circus grounds. The forgotten corners where the everyday world bled into Moonshade's decaying illusion. The local Redwater police had been unhelpful. "That place is bad ground, Cole," the grizzled sheriff had warned, his face pale. "Some doors are best left unopened." The Vale family's money had bought my services, not necessarily local cooperation. I found the animal enclosures first. A row of rusted barred wagons half swallowed by thorny vines. The air here was rank with the phantom scent of unclean straw and wild beasts, though it had clearly been decades since any living creature had been caged within. Most were empty, their floors thick with leaf litter and debris. Then I heard it, a low guttural growl, vibrating through the very earth, followed by a deafening, full-throated roar that echoed off the silent tents. It was unmistakably a lion, powerful, enraged. It came from the largest wagon, the one with Sultan, king of the beasts, still faintly stenciled on its faded paintwork. The cage was patently empty, its door bolted shut with a rusted padlock the size of my fist. Rule number 2, if lions roar from empty cages, throw raw meat inside. My gut churned. This was insane. But Grinwald's parting words, the weight of this place. I found a half-rotted insulated cooler tucked under a pile of canvas, as if left there by a careless stagehand. Inside, wrapped in stained butcher paper, were several large, disturbingly fresh-looking cuts of raw red meat. The chill of it was unnatural against my fingers. With a deep breath that tasted of dust and rising panic, I unlatched the paper, my hand shaking, and hurled a hefty stake through a gap in the rusted bars. The roaring stopped, cut off abruptly. It was replaced by a series of wet, tearing, crunching sounds from within the empty cage. My stomach heaved. I backed away, not wanting to see whatever it was. Later, steeling myself, I returned. The meat was gone. The cage was still sealed tight, but etched into the thick rust on the inside of the bars, fresh and gleaming as if gouged by immense non-feline claws, were 3 deep, parallel cylinders. My flashlight beam trembled. I sought out Jenny King next. I'd been told she was one of the few long-term residents, if one could call squatting in a condemned trailer on the circus's edge residing. She was a woman in her 30s, her face etched with a weary sadness that made her look older. A pronounced limp marred her once graceful movements. She was mending a tattered sequined costume in the dim light of her trailer when I found her. "Looking for the girl, Marina?" she asked, her voice raspy, not meeting my eyes. "Lots of folks come looking. Not many leave with what they came for." She offered little, her words wrapped in layers of bitterness and fear. "This ain't just a circus, detective. It's a performance, and it never, ever ends. The Jester makes sure of that. The Crimson Jester." The name was a venomous whisper. As I left her, the distant, discordant strains of a calliope organ started up from the direction of the main tent. A jaunty, horrifying tune played on out-of-key pipes. No one was near it. I'd checked. The music seemed to skip and stutter, like a broken record, before winding down with a wheezing sigh. In the rapidly fading daylight, the shadows cast by the striped tents seemed to lengthen and twist, forming grotesque, capering figures that danced just at the edge of my vision. This place was not just abandoned. It was actively, malevolently waiting. Marina Vala wasn't just a runaway with a penchant for the dramatic. She was an obsessive. I found her nest in what must have been a disused acrobat's dressing room, tucked away behind the horse stables. A mildewed mattress, energy bar wrappers, and a collection of sketchbooks. The drawings were unsettling. Detailed renderings of the Moonshade Circus, not as it was, but as it might have been in some fevered dream. Jesters with blood-red smiles, acrobats with too many limbs, an audience of skeletal figures in decaying finery. Interspersed were poetic fragments, dark and yearning, about an eternal stage, a performance beyond life. She wasn't just visiting, she was auditioning. A small leather-bound diary was tucked beneath the mattress. Her entry started with a thrill-seeker's excitement, then shifted. She wrote of whispers in the canvas, of eyes in the darkness, of feeling a powerful presence that promised her a starring role. The last entry, dated just before her official disappearance. The jester sees me. He knows my desire. The audition is tonight. I will not be an understudy. Later that evening, as I was sifting through a pile of rotting playbills in the main office, a cramped, dusty room that still smelled faintly of Grinwald's cloying cologne. A chill that had nothing to do with the night air snaked down my spine. A woman stood in the doorway, wreathed in shadows. Eloise Renner. Her eyes were covered by a thick, black silk scarf, embroidered with silver spirals. She was ageless, her voice a low, melodic lilt. The detective seeks answers where only echoes reside, she intoned, stepping further into the room. A small, velvet-wrapped bundle was in her hands. The threads of fate are tangled here, caught in the jester's web. Perhaps the cards can illuminate your path, or your ending. Rule number 3. If the tarot reader offers you a reading, accept the fate revealed. My heart hammered against my ribs. Logic screamed at me to walk away, to dismiss this as more circus theatrics. But the weight of the previous rules, the claw marks, the phantom music. "All right, Madame Eloise," I said, my voice drearier than I intended. "Deal me in." She smiled, a slow, knowing expression, and unwrapped the cards. They were ancient, their images faded and disturbing. She laid them out on the dusty desk with practiced, unnervingly certain movements. The Hanged Man, the tower, struck by crimson lightning, the moon with a leering jester-like face, and finally, the Fool. But this fool was dressed in a jester's motley of blood, red and funeral black, one foot stepping blithely off a precipice into an abyss filled with grinning, shadowy faces, a path of revelation and ruin. "Detective," Eloise murmured, "you chase a shadow that wishes to be caught by the darkness. One among you wears a mask of sorrow to hide a puppet's strings. Felix, and your own fate. Ah, it dances on the jester's thread. You may find what you seek, but the price is to join the eternal cast." Her words hung in the air, heavy and suffused with a chilling finality. When I reached into my jacket pocket later for my notepad, my fingers brushed against a stiff piece of card. It was the Fool, the Crimson Jester, from her deck. Marina's diary had mentioned communicating with someone inside Moonshade, someone who understood the poetry of the shadows. Was it Eloise, or someone far more sinister? Sleep offered no escape, only a parade of disjointed, circus-themed nightmares. By morning, my skepticism was a tattered flag, battered by a relentless barrage of the impossible. The very air of Moonshade felt charged, expectant. I heard it more clearly now. Faint, disembodied applause from the empty big top when I walked past, as if an unseen audience was appreciating some silent, macabre performance. A cold breath would sometimes ghost across the back of my neck when I was alone in one of the rotten tents, followed by a faint, childish giggle that would vanish as soon as I turned. Props in the storage areas, a unicycle, a set of juggling pins, would be subtly rearranged overnight, moved by invisible stagehands. My focus sharpened on Felix Grinwald. His explanations were too polished, his sorrow too theatrical. He knew more, far more than he let on. Toad, the hulking, silent groundskeeper, seemed to be my only reluctant ally. One morning, I found a crude drawing scrawled in the dust outside my borrowed, dilapidated trailer. A stick figure with a top hat, Felix, leading a smaller figure, Marina, towards a stylized drawing of the main tent, but with a dark, ominous hole drawn beneath its stage. Following that silent clue, I found what must have been Felix's old, abandoned office, tucked away in a series of interconnected wagons that had once housed the circus's administrative staff. It was a shrine to decay, but amidst the moldering ledgers and rusted filing cabinets, I found a locked strongbox. Inside, beneath a pile of yellowed contracts and faded photographs of performers long dead, was a slim file. Its label: Moonshade Investigation, Confidential. Investigator, F. Grinwald. My blood ran cold. The file contained newspaper clippings from 40 years prior, detailing the original mass disappearance at Moonshade, and Felix's own meticulously typed notes. His early entries were logical, precise, the observations of a keen detective. Then, they began to unravel. He wrote of unnatural phenomena, of feeling watched by the canvas itself, of a sentient malice within the grounds. His handwriting grew erratic, his theories wilder, speaking of an ancient entity and a performance that demands sacrifice. The last entry was a single, chilling sentence. The jester has offered me a role. The curtain rises on a new act. I will direct. I was still reeling from this when Felix himself appeared in the doorway of the cramped wagon, his expression unreadable. Finding inspiration in the archives, Detective Cole? He asked, his voice smooth, but with an edge I hadn't noticed before. Something like that, I said, trying to keep my voice even. Your predecessor, Grinwald, he seemed to have some interesting theories. Felix smiled, a slow, predatory curving of his lips. Ah, yes. Poor Felix. He became rather enamored with Moonshade's mythology. Let it consume him, I'm afraid. He took a step closer. The air grew colder. One has to be careful, Detective. Sometimes, when you stare too long into the grease paint stares back. Care for a private tour of the understage? Some of our most memorable acts originated there. He gestured towards the main tent. It wasn't an invitation. It was a summons. And for a fleeting, terrifying moment, I saw not Felix Grinwald, the mournful custodian, but a different face superimposed over his. A flash of white grease paint, a blood-red grinning rictus, the jester. In his other hand, almost hidden behind his back, he held a small antique child's jack-in-the-box. Its painted jester face eerily similar to the one on my tarot card. He wound its tiny crank, and a tinny, discordant version of Pop Goes the Weasel began to play, each note a chilling counterpoint to the growing horror in my chest. He was testing me. And the show, I realized with a sickening lurch, was about to truly begin. Felix Grinwald's invitation, or rather, his command, hung in the frigid air of the cramped office wagon. The tinny, discordant notes of Pop Goes the Weasel from the jack-in-the-box he held seemed to drill directly into my skull, a grotesque overture to a descent I knew I couldn't refuse. His eyes, no longer holding any pretense of sorrowful charm, glittered with a cold, ancient amusement. The brief, superimposed image of the jester's grinning rictus had burned itself onto my retinas. This was no longer an investigation. It was an abduction into the heart of a waking nightmare. The understage holds many secrets, Detective. Felix purred, his voice now imbued with a chilling resonance that seemed to echo from a place far deeper than his own chest. The true foundations of Moonshade, where the magic is made. He turned, a silent, imperious gesture for me to follow. There was no choice. To refuse now would be to invite an immediate, and likely far more gruesome, end. He led me from the dusty administrative wagons, through the eerie, silent midway, with its skeletal rides and boarded-up game booths, towards the looming presence of the main tent. The very canvas seemed to breathe, to pulse with a faint internal luminescence, the faded stripes now appearing like veins on diseased skin. The oppressive silence was broken only by our footsteps, and the relentless, maddening tune from the jack-in-the-box. Instead of entering through the main audience flaps, Felix guided me around to a less conspicuous moldering service entrance near the back. He produced an ornate, tarnished brass key and unlocked a heavy, reinforced door I hadn't noticed before. Beyond it, A narrow stone staircase spiraled downwards into a damp, cloying darkness. The air that wafted up was thick with the smell of wet earth, decay, and that same sweet coppery tang I'd first noticed. The scent of old blood, now almost overwhelming. "After you, Detective Cole," Felix said, his smile a rictus in the dim light filtering from outside. "The press show is about to begin." The staircase descended further than I thought possible, as if we were entering the very bowels of the earth beneath the circus. The walls were slick with moisture, and strange phosphorescent fungi clung to the stones, casting an eerie, corpse-light glow. The sounds of the surface world faded, replaced by a low, rhythmic thrumming, like a colossal, sleeping heartbeat, and faint, distant whispers that seemed to slither through the rock. The stairs opened into a vast, cavernous space. It was a labyrinth of rough-hewn tunnels, vaulted chambers, and forgotten storage areas, all existing in a state of advanced decay, yet disturbingly alive. Chains hung from the low ceilings, Menagerie ending in rusted manacles. Strange, unsettling props lay scattered about, oversized puppet heads with vacant, staring eyes, distorted mirrors that reflected grotesque, elongated versions of myself. A child's rocking horse, rocking gently on its own, its painted smile fixed and manic. "This," Felix announced, his voice echoing unnaturally, "is where the true artistry of Moonshade is born, where the raw material is shaped, and then the illusions began. Not subtle tricks of light and shadow, but full-blown, terrifyingly real manifestations." The walls seemed to writhe, the stone momentarily taking on the texture of stretched canvas, painted with leering, jeering faces. Phantom performers flickered into existence, a ghostly acrobat tumbling from the shadows, her limbs bending at impossible angles, a fire-eater whose flames burned cold and black, consuming the very light around him, a troupe of clowns, their faces painted in rictuses of silent, unending agony, their eyes burning with a malevolent intelligence, their movements jerky and puppet-like. They didn't interact with us directly, but performed their grotesque parodies of circus acts just for us, their spectral audience of two. I saw them then, the true audience of Moonshade. Seated on crude stone ledges carved into the walls of a larger chamber we entered were dozens of figures, some skeletal, some disturbingly preserved, all dressed in decaying finery from decades past. Their eye sockets were dark and empty, yet I felt their collective, chilling gaze upon me. Disembodied applause, dry and brittle like rustling bones, echoed through the chamber. And it was here, amidst this gallery of the damned, that I found Marina Vale. She stood on a raised dais at the far end of the chamber, not a prisoner, but a focal point. She was dressed in a bizarre, theatrical costume pieced together from tattered silks and tarnished sequins, her face painted with stark, dramatic makeup. Her eyes, when they met mine, shone with an unnatural, feverish light. There was no fear in them, only a chilling, ecstatic fervor. "Detective Cole," she said, her voice a strange, lilting sing-song. "You made it to the command performance. I knew you would. The jester always gets his audience." "Marina," I managed, my voice hoarse. "What is this? What have they done to you?" She laughed, a high, brittle sound that held no mirth. "Done to me? Oh, detective, they've liberated me. I'm no longer just Marina Vale, the bored little rich girl. I am La Fantasma, the star of the penumbra. I have a role now, an eternal spotlight." She gestured to the spectral audience. "They adore me." Felix stepped forward, placing a proprietary hand on Marina's shoulder. His smile was that of a proud, if deeply corrupt, mentor. "You see, detective, she understands. She has embraced the artistry." The jester recognized her talent, her hunger. He turned his gaze fully on me, the amusement gone, replaced by a cold, appraising look. "And now he wishes to see what role you might play in our little troupe. Every show needs fresh blood, fresh faces. Some are destined for the chorus, some for a brief, tragic cameo. But you, Detective Cole, the Jester feels you have the potential for a much more significant part, perhaps even my understudy. Before I could react, before I could even process the full horror of Marina's willing damnation and Felix's true, predatory nature, the very air in the chamber grew heavy, charged with an immense ancient power. The thrumming heartbeat intensified, shaking the stones beneath my feet. The phosphorescent fungi pulsed with a violent blood-red light, and from the deepest shadows behind the dais, a figure began to coalesce. It was tall, impossibly thin, draped in a jester's motley of crimson and midnight black, the fabric seeming to writhe and shift as if woven from living shadows. Its face was a stark white mask of grease paint, but the features beneath were fluid, constantly shifting. A leering grin one moment, a rictus of profound sorrow the next, then a silent, open-mouthed scream. Its eyes were burning coals, promising both ecstasy and eternal torment. This was no man in a costume. This was something ancient, something unholy. The Crimson Jester. Its laughter filled the chamber, not a sound of mirth, but a discordant symphony of 1,000 trapped voices. The joyful shrieks of children, the agonized sobs of the dying, the mad cackling of the damned, all woven into one terrifying, overwhelming chorus. It fixed its burning gaze on me, and I felt my sanity begin to fray, my carefully constructed walls of logic and reason crumbling under the weight of its absolute, malevolent presence. Felix grinned while bowed low, a theatrical flourish. Marina Vale curtsied, her eyes alight with fanatical devotion. "Behold, Detective Cole," Felix intoned, his voice dripping with mock reverence, "the true master of ceremonies, the heart and soul of Moonshade Circus." The Crimson Jester took a slow, deliberate step towards me, its shadow stretching, elongating, like a grasping claw. The show, my personal, horrifying debut, was about to begin. The Crimson Jester's presence was a physical assault. The air crackled with an unseen energy, the coppery scent of blood now intermingled with the cloying sweetness of funereal flowers, and something else, something like burnt ozone and pure, distilled fear. Its burning eyes, ancient and infinitely cruel, bored into me, stripping away pretense, dissecting my deepest terrors. The chorus of trapped souls that formed its laughter clawed at my mind, each individual shriek and sob a testament to its power. A new player enters the grand charade. The Jester's voice boomed, though its painted lips did not move. It was a sound that resonated in my bones, 1,000 whispers and shouts converging into articulate, terrifying speech. A man of logic, of cold, hard facts. How delightful. Such material offers the most exquisite breaking point. Felix Grinwald straightened from his bow, his face alight with a sycophantic eagerness. He is resilient, master, but all masks crack under the right, theatrical direction. Marina, beside him, watched me with an almost cannibalistic curiosity, as if eager to see how I would be unmade. And so, my performance began. It wasn't a choice. It was an imposition. The chamber around us shifted, the stone walls melting away, replaced by the garish painted canvas of the main circus tent, yet impossibly vast, distorted, as if seen through a madman's lens. The spectral audience leaned forward, their empty sockets fixed on me. I was thrust into a series of grotesque parodies of circus acts. One moment I was on a high wire, impossibly thin, stretched over an abyss filled with grasping, shadowy hands, the Jester's laughter booming with each imagined slip. The next, I was a reluctant lion tamer, facing not beasts of flesh and blood, but roaring, phantasmal manifestations of my own past failures. The unsolved cases, the faces of victims I couldn't save, their eyes accusing, their voices part of the Ano Jestas chorus. Each failure to tame them resulted in a fresh wave of psychic torment, the jester feeding on my despair. Then, a rigged game of chance, 3 ornate skull-adorned cups shuffled by a skeletal hand, one hiding a writhing serpent, the others. Oblivion. Choose wisely, detective. The jester's voice mocked. Every choice has a consequence in this theater. My logic, my detective's intuition, was useless against a game where the rules were written by a malevolent god. Through it all, Felix acted as a grotesque stage manager, offering poisoned advice, nudging me towards pre-scripted failures. His earlier weariness replaced by a chilling, almost gleeful participation. Marina danced at the periphery, a gleeful nymph of damnation, sometimes offering a poisoned apple of a clue, sometimes actively trying to trip me into the jester's snares. My mind reeled. The rules. The Roy-only anchor. Don't sit in seat number 9. That seat, I now understood, was a focal point of concentrated despair, a direct conduit to the jester's deepest well of power. If lions roar, throw raw meat. The spectral lions, my failures. What meat could I offer them? The realization hit me. My guilt, my self-recrimination. By accepting their spectral accusations, by acknowledging the pain, their roars momentarily softened, their forms grew less distinct. It didn't defeat them, but it brought me moments of clarity. If the tarot reader offers you a reading, accept the fate revealed. Eloise, where was she? As if summoned by the thought, her voice, calm and melodic, amidst the jester's cacophony, echoed in my mind, not from anywhere in the illusory tent, but from within. The fool steps willingly into the abyss, for only in chaos can the true path be found. Your fate, detective, is not to be the jester, but to unmask the play. Unmask the play. The words resonated. This was all a performance, albeit a deadly one. The jester fed on belief, on participation in its script. Suddenly, Toad, the hulking groundskeeper, was there, materializing from the shadows at the edge of the illusory stage. He grunted, thrusting something into my hand. A small, crudely carved wooden bird, surprisingly warm to the touch. Then, with a speed that belied his bulk, he pointed towards a specific section of the illusory audience, towards a ghostly figure that seemed more solid, more anguished than the others. The specter of Jenny King's lost lover, the acrobat. Before I could question, Toad was gone, swallowed by the shifting scenery. The jester, sensing a shift, a flicker of defiance, intensified its assault. The illusions grew more potent, the psychic pressure almost unbearable. Felix cackled, urging the jester on. Marina's dance became more frenzied, more predatory. I was faltering. The abyss of seat 9 seemed to whisper my name, promising an end to the torment. Eloise's words, Toad's gesture. The wooden bird clutched in my sweating palm. Fragments of a desperate last-ditch strategy began to form. This wasn't a battle I could win with force, or even logic in the conventional sense. The jester stage was built on its own twisted internal consistency. To break the performance, I had to introduce an unscripted element, a discordant note so profound it would shatter the illusion. "You want a show, Jester?" I yelled, my voice raw, a desperate gamble. "You want a grand finale?" I strode towards the section of the spectral audience Toad had indicated, towards the anguished ghost of Jenny's acrobat. "Then let's give them one they'll never forget." This was horrendously risky, interacting directly with one of the cast outside the jester's script. As I approached the ghost, it recoiled, its silent scream intensifying. But I held up the small wooden bird Toad had given me. "He remembers you," I said, my voice projecting, addressing not just the ghost, but the entire grotesque theater. "Jenny remembers you. Your love was real, not a part of this. This lie, a flicker." For a microsecond, the acrobat's spectral form seemed less tormented, a hint of confused recognition in its hollow eyes. The jester shrieked, a sound of nails on a chalkboard, the illusion around us wavering, the colors dimming. Felix looked momentarily stunned. Marina's dance faltered. Love? Sentiment? The jester's voice was laced with contempt, but also a new, faint note of uncertainty. Such fleeting, fragile things have no place in my eternal masterpiece. They're the only things that are real, I retorted, pressing on. This circus, your power. It's built on stolen moments, twisted memories. But you can't truly own what was freely given. I looked directly at the jester, channeling every ounce of defiance I possessed. My fate, according to your reader, was to join the cast. And I accept that fate. The jester's form seemed to swell, its grin widening. Felix looked triumphant. Marina clapped her hands with a childlike, malicious glee. But not as your puppet, I roared. I turned back to the spectral acrobat, holding out the wooden bird. This is from Jenny, a token of a real life, a real love, outside this prison. I then did the unthinkable. I walked towards the spectral manifestation of Seat 9, the one I'd been warned against, the vortex of despair. The jester's laughter boomed, anticipating my fall, but instead of sitting, I placed the small wooden bird carefully onto the phantom seat. I offer this memory, this fragment of true connection, to your abyss, jester. Let your despair try to consume that. The moment the bird touched the seat, an ear-splitting shriek, not of triumph but of agony, tore from the jester. The wooden bird glowed with an intense, pure white light, pushing back against the shadows. The illusion of Seat 9 buckled, cracked, then shattered like black glass. The jester recoiled, its form flickering violently, the chorus of trapped souls in its voice, momentarily dissolving into a cacophony of pained, individual cries. The entire illusory circus shuddered. Felix screamed, clutching his head. Marina stumbled, her painted smile frozen in a mask of confusion and dawning fear. The spectral audience flickered and dimmed. The ghost of the acrobat looked towards the light emanating from the bird, a single spectral tear tracing a path down its cheek, before it began to fade, not into the jester's grasp, but into something calmer. The script! You've broken the script, Felix shrieked, his composure shattered, his face aging decades in moments. The master demands adherence. The master feeds on adherence. I countered, feeling a surge of something other than terror. A desperate, fragile hope. But even an eternal performance needs an audience that chooses to watch. I didn't know if I could destroy the jester, but I had disrupted its play. Introduced an element of genuine, uncorrupted emotion. It couldn't process, couldn't control. The understage labyrinth was reasserting itself around us, the grand illusions collapsing into decaying stone and shadow. Felix, now a withered husk of his former self, lunged for me, no longer a ringmaster, but a desperate, cornered animal. You will pay. You will join us. The show must go on. Marina, seeing her eternal spotlight dimming, turned on me too, her face contorted in a snarl of childish rage. But their attacks were weaker now, their power, so tied to the jester's, waning. The jester itself was still there, a towering shadow of rage and confusion, but its hold felt lessened. The ground beneath my feet, the real stone, felt more solid. I didn't fight them head on. I scrambled back towards the spiraling staircase the way I'd come in. The path was clearer now, the jester's illusions flickering and dying. I burst out of the service door, back into the gray, pre-dawn light of the real world. Behind me, I heard a final, earth-shattering roar of fury from beneath the Moonshade grounds, a sound of thwarted godhood, followed by a series of deep, subterranean groans, as if the very foundations of the circus were collapsing in on themselves. I didn't look back. I ran. The Moonshade Circus still stands, or what's left of it. They say it's quieter now. The legend's less potent. Felix Grinwald was never seen again. Marina Valle still listed as missing, though some locals whisper of a ghostly girl in theatrical makeup, seen flitting through the decaying tents on moonless nights, forever searching for her lost audience. I carry the scars, of course. The world feels thinner now, more fragile. Sometimes, late at night, when the wind howls just so, I hear the faint, discordant echo of calliope music, and in my office, tucked away in a locked drawer, is a small, crudely carved wooden bird. It's a reminder that even in the deepest darkness, ruled by the most malevolent of jesters, a single, genuine act, a discordant note of truth, can sometimes be enough to tear a hole in the curtain. The show may always be waiting in the wings. But for now, at least my performance is over. I took my bow, and I walked away. Moonshade Circus holds its terrible secrets in the shadows, guarded by a jester who demands an eternal encore. Detective Cole learned that some cases lead to places where reality is just another act. The rules were a desperate guide through a performance stage for his soul. The show is over, but the laughter lingers. Seriously, if you didn't stay until the very end, you missed the ultimate curtain call. Eloise's words, Toad's gesture. The wooden bird clutched in my sweating palm. Fragments of a desperate last-ditch strategy began to form. This wasn't a battle I could win with force, or even logic in the conventional sense. The jester stage was built on its own twisted internal consistency. To break the performance, I had to introduce an unscripted element, a discordant note so profound it would shatter the illusion. "You want a show, Jester?" I yelled, my voice raw. A desperate gamble. "You want a grand finale?"